You know, have you ever been jolted awake by an emergency alert? That sound blaring from your radio, maybe during a bad storm, giving you that critical info?
Yeah.
Or maybe thinking back, you remember as a kid, just like totally captivated by a show. Maybe a friendly tiger or a big yellow bird. Learning about kindness, numbers, all without any commercials.
Absolutely. Those are really vivid memories for a lot of people.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're actually unpacking a big decision in Congress that touches on exactly those things. It's about the recent federal funding cuts to PBS and NPR.
Right. And for our deep dive today, we're drawing on quite a range of sources. We've got news reports from places like AP, Al Jazeera,
Okay.
a financial breakdown from Tax Shark, some backgrounds from the PBS Foundation itself, and even some historical context on media independence from Wikipedia.
So our mission here is really to get our heads around the many consequences of these cuts. What does it mean for PBS and NPR? And maybe more importantly, what does it mean for you listening right now and just the whole landscape of information in America?
Exactly. And I think to really get the significance, we first need to understand what makes American public media, well, unique.
Yeah, that's key.
Because PBS and NPR, they aren't just channels you flip through. They're institutions, right?
Mm.
Over 50 years old now, known for being non-commercial, and frankly, often highly trusted.
And it's important to say they're not like the BBC, for example. That's more centralized, state-funded.
Completely different models.
Ours is way more decentralized. You've got, what, over 1,500 local public TV and radio stations scattered all across the country?
That's right. And they're licensed to all sorts of different groups, local nonprofits, universities, sometimes even city or county authorities. It's very grassroots.
Community-based, really.
Yeah. And the federal money they get comes through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the CPB. That was set up back in '67 with the Public Broadcasting Act.
And the amount you said is roughly $500 million a year,
Yep, around that mark.
which if you break it down per person, it's like, what? $1.40 per American per year.
Something like that. Less than a cup of coffee, as you said.
It sounds tiny when you put it like that, yet it supports this huge network. And what's really interesting is, while that federal cash is maybe only 15% of the average station's budget,
Uh-huh.
for the smaller stations, the rural ones, it's way more critical, sometimes like 30, 40%, maybe even more.
That's absolutely correct. It's disproportionately important for them. And crucial to note, 95% of that CPB money goes straight to the local stations, not sitting in some national HQ pot.
Right, directly to the communities.
So this recent action by Congress, it's pretty major. The House approved President Trump's request to claw back about $9 billion overall.
Okay.
And specifically around $1.1 billion of that targets the CPB,
Yeah.
which basically zeroes out their funding for the next couple of budget years.
Wow. Zeroes it out. And you mentioned this is the first time in decades that this kind of rescission request has actually gone through Congress.
Yeah, it's a significant departure from past practice.
So looking at the reports, what are the main arguments for these cuts? What are the proponents saying?
Well, the main lines you hear, often from the White House and supporters, are things like budget savings. Also, there's a philosophical argument about whether the government should be involved in funding media at all.
Hmm.
And then there are the accusations you sometimes hear that public media is, quote, politically biased or not reporting fairly. The belief there is that media should survive purely on market funding, ads, subscriptions, that sort of thing.
Okay, so that's the argument. But then you look at the counter arguments, especially on the money side. It paints a different picture. That $500 million budget for CPB, it's what, 0.01% of federal spending?
It's incredibly small. The comparison one analysis used was like someone earning $50,000 a year decided to cut back by $5.
Yeah.
Symbolic, maybe, but fiscally not significant. And beyond just the small amount, it's actually been shown to be a really effective investment. Public media has this history of high return. For every federal dollar they get, stations typically raise another $6 or $7 from other places.
From local donations, grants.
Exactly. Local support, foundations, corporate underwriting. It's like seed money that unlocks much larger community investment.
Yeah, that's a powerful model. And the thing that really stood out to me was comparing U.S. spending to other developed countries. We spend way less per person on public media than places like the UK, Germany, Japan.
Far less. Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, are these cuts really about efficiency, or is it dismantling something that's actually quite efficient, especially at reaching communities that commercial media might ignore? It feels potentially, penny wise and pound foolish.
That's a very apt way to put it. And moving beyond the budgets and the politics, let's talk about the real-world effects, the immediate impact this could have on communities.
Mhm.
One of the biggest concerns is for rural areas. You mentioned those smaller stations. There are about 250 of them serving rural communities, often running on, well, shoestring budgets.
And for them, those federal grants aren't just a nice bonus, they're a lifeline, a significant share, as the reports put it.
Absolutely. Losing that could literally mean some towns go dark. They might lose their only local broadcast source for news, school closings, community events, even stuff like high school football scores.
Which is kind of ironic, isn't it? Because some of those rural areas are politically conservative. The very places some supporters of the cuts represent, they could be hit the hardest.
It's a definite potential consequence. And it's not just about daily news. Public safety is a huge concern, too.
So,
Well, public broadcasters are deeply integrated into the emergency alert system, the EAS. They're the ones often pushing out alerts for tornadoes, wildfires, ambient alerts,
critical stuff.
especially in areas where internet or cell service can be patchy. Sometimes that FM radio signal is literally the only lifeline people have in an emergency.
Yeah, you hear stories about that all the time. Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska pointed this out, right? How public stations there consistently provided alerts for tsunamis, landslides, even volcano warnings after earthquakes.
Exactly, that's a perfect example. So losing these stations isn't just about convenience. It could genuinely compromise public safety.
That's sobering.
And then there's the impact on kids' programming. Generations, really, grew up learning from PBS kids shows. Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, Daniel Tiger.
Yeah, classics. Free, high quality, no ads.
And that accessibility relies heavily on public funding. Cutting it puts the production of new episodes, even whole new shows, at risk.
Which could easily widen the education gap, couldn't it? Families who can't afford streaming or cable might lose access to those crucial early learning resources. It becomes an equity issue.
Precisely. It's about equal access to fundamental education. And we also have to talk about local news.
Right. The journalism side.
NPR's network, all those local member stations, they do so much community-focused reporting, covering city hall, local business, state government, stuff national news just doesn't touch.
Absolutely critical work. And the federal funds, they help pay for that, right? Reporters' salaries, keeping the newsrooms running.
Yes, they're a key part of the funding mix for local journalism in many places. Without that support, you could definitely see layoffs or closure of newsrooms.
Which leads to that term you hear, news desertification.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Communities left with fewer reliable sources, or maybe none at all. And that weakens the whole watchdog function that media, especially local media, is supposed to play over government.
Yeah, that's a serious concern for local democracy.
And the impact, it just keeps rippling outwards. It touches parts of society you might not immediately think about, like underserved audiences.
Minority groups, indigenous communities.
Yes. Public media often has a specific mission to serve those groups. You have stations broadcasting in Navajo, Lakota, languages you won't find anywhere else on the dial.
And the federal grants specifically help support that kind of diversity in media.
The offer do, yes. But these very specific vital services are often the most at risk. Why? Because a small tribal station or community station has a much harder time replacing lost federal dollars compared to a big urban station with, a larger donor pool.
That makes sense. It creates an unfair burden.
And then there's the jobs angle. Simple economics.
Yeah.
Over 19,000 people work in public media across the country.
Wow, that many.
Yeah. So cuts inevitably mean layoffs, hiring freezes, maybe salary cuts.
And that's not just the jobs themselves, it's the local economic impact, right? These stations, they're often anchors in their towns. They rent space, buy supplies locally, host events.
Exactly. Layoffs mean less local spending.
Yeah.
It hurts the community directly. We're already seeing it. You mentioned Sean Turner at WKR in Michigan.
Yeah, laid off 9 staff already, anticipating cuts, said it hit their investigative work.
Right. So it's not hypothetical. It's happening now.
And what about the cultural side? PBS is huge for arts, science, shows like Great Performances, American Masters, Nova.
Absolutely. That kind of high-quality niche programming, and often doesn't pull massive commercial ratings, but it has immense public value.
So less funding could mean fewer documentaries, fewer independent films shown, a kind of cultural impoverishment.
That's the fear. Fewer opportunities for millions of Americans to access that kind of enriching content, especially if they rely on free broadcast TV. It's a quiet loss, maybe, but a deep one.
So if the federal money disappears, Stations have to make it up somewhere else. They'll have to lean harder on corporate sponsors, big donors, foundations.
That seems inevitable, yes.
Yeah.
Which could mean more pledge drives, more enhanced underwriting messages you hear on air.
And does that raise concerns about independence, even just the perception of it?
It certainly can. There's always the worry about potential conflicts of interest or even just looking like you might be influenced by funders, which is tricky because PBS has consistently been rated the most trusted institution in America for news.
For 21 years straight, I read that.
Yeah. So shifting towards more reliance on corporate money could start to erode that trust, that unique identity as a commercial-free space. It changes the feel of public media,
Hmm.
and that ties into the bigger picture. The core goal of public broadcasting has always been universal access. Quality information, education, available to everyone, no matter their income or where they live.
But if federal support vanishes, you risk creating a bigger divide.
That's the concern. Wealthier urban areas might find ways to replace the funding through donations. But poorer areas, rural areas, they'll likely struggle. You end up with a widening gap in information access.
A broadcast divide layered on top of the digital divide we already talked about.
Exactly, creating information haves and have-nots, which, fundamentally undermines the idea of an informed citizenry that democracy really depends on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And finally, there's the whole issue of politicization. Just the act of zeroing out funding like this, it sets a really concerning precedent. It looks like the government might be trying to penalize media organizations for content some politicians dislike.
Regardless of intent, that perception is damaging. It raises alarms about the independence of media in a democracy, doesn't it?
It does. And if trusted, non-commercial sources like PBS and NPR are weakened, where do people turn? Maybe to more partisan sources, maybe less reliable ones. It could actually make the misinformation problems we already face even worse.
Like Sage Smiley from KYUK in Alaska said, the whole point of the CPB was to buffer public media from political interference. The government really has no place intervening in editorial decisions or punishing them.
That's the principle at stake.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've seen how this relatively small federal investment, that $1.40 per person, has supported so much emergency alerts, kids' education, local news, culture, and how taking it away could have these really deep, far-reaching impacts across the country.
Yeah, it's clear that public media, despite any criticisms, plays a unique role. That focus on public service, universal access, trying to be a trusted source. It's different from commercial media.
So thinking about this unique, decentralized system we have and everything it provides, it leaves us with a question for you, the listener. What responsibility do we as individuals, as communities have in shaping what happens next? How do we maintain a diverse, independent media, especially now, with so much information, so much polarization out there? What do you think is the most critical thing we stand to lose if institutions like PBS and NPR diminish?